if you can punch above your weight class, if you can aim high, I mean, higher than 4x of what you thought your goal should be. If you're thinking about raising 20 million, you want to think about 80 million. If you're thinking about building a company with 2 million in revenue, you want to think 8 million in revenue. The moment you start to aim high as a first step, you are forced to find ways to now make it happen. You're going to find unconventional approaches. You're going to find ways that you never thought about before.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumitech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. This one is all about leadership. Meet Tanvir Banghoo, a #1 best-selling author, acclaimed speaker, and team coach. He is a former digital executive and college football national champion. Today, Tanvir helps leaders worldwide build championship teams in disruptive and uncertain environments. Tanvir's latest book, The P.R.O. Business Mindset, How to Lead Amid Disruption and Chaos, breaks down his unique leadership framework. This framework helped Tanvir win championships in the boardroom based on what he had learned on the football field. Tanvir gets quoted in major media outlets and often teaches guest lectures in leading business schools.
Well, how does Tanvir get to work so much about leadership? Also, even before thinking critically about solely leadership, more, from an athlete and an executive in tech. What is sort of your trajectory in this regard?
Yes, a lot of people ask me that question, and I usually start off with how I played football in university. Mm-hmm. So I played college football in Canada at McMaster University, and that's really where I started. I think I didn't know at that time that all the stuff that I'm seeing here and learning is pretty much how to lead in business until many years later. And so what happened was I graduated. So we won a national championship in my fourth year, from a team that had average record to being the best in the country. I graduated, went on to work corporate after my MBA, and I started, asking myself these questions. What was so great about the football team? And why are some teams in business also great, but some not so great? Even though we have all the money, the resources, and all the strategies, right? The decks and the PowerPoints. Many years later, about a few years ago, or 2019, 2020, I looked back at my career and I was able to get promoted pretty quickly. I was a VP of tech in my 20s. And when I look back, I saw something, striking. I said, well, what allowed me to do all these great things in technology with no tech background? And it was never anything about technology. It was actually a lot about the things I learned in football. For example, building your foundation, spending time when nobody's watching you to prepare for the year ahead, or working with difficult personalities, working as a team towards a common goal. So that I said, that's pretty interesting. And then I started to implement these same strategies in the teams that I was leading, and same thing, we started seeing a lot of success. And so that's really what allowed me to go from football to corporate, to executive, and then finally I said, well, I want to find a way to share this message with the world, and that's where I am today, where I wrote the book. And I'm actually helping companies now implement these strategies.
Well, let's dive deep into the pro business. So what does that mean? And what is pro, besides pro from an athlete perspective, what does it stand out for you?
Yeah, so the pro business mindset, it's a concept. It's 3 different things. So the P.R.O. P is for all the athletes out there or sports fanatics. P is the playoffs or the postseason, where you're actually competing for the championship. R is the stage before that, which is your, regular exhibition matches or regular season, where you're actually having the games and the round robins. And the O is the off season. Now, the off season is the part that none of us see as spectators. It's when the teams are building their teams out, working out, training, reviewing their strategy, building the playbook for the year to come. So now that framework is exactly what I've, put in business. And said, well, any business, before you can do either a digital transformation project, build a new team, lead a new business, do a new merger acquisition campaign, it has to start with the O first. You have to put in the work in the off season. For example, building your teams that are adaptable, getting buy-in to your vision. Then you go to the regular season where you actually have to execute. There's a lot of noise, a lot of distractions. How do you know what are the right actions to take every single day, every single week? So finally you get into the playoffs where you have to be able to adjust and pivot very quickly. And also you have to know how to make mistakes, but be okay with it and then move forward and continue on the path. So that in a nutshell is the P.R.O methodology that I've written the book on, and also, I implement or run a lot of business workshops through as well.
So what are some of the pitfalls that have, you're observing where, people would need to be guided perhaps, or would benefit from getting guidance on these exact principles? What are the sort of pitfalls that you're observing?
Yeah, I'll tell you 3 things that I've noticed in my corporate career, even today when we're working with a lot of the larger companies. First of all, people love to execute without preparation. I think we've all been there where, I myself, I've learned this is the hard way, where I've got a project or I've got somebody from the leadership team tell me, hey, Tanvir, I want you to go and fix this. The first thing that I would do earlier is just go and start working on it. What this tells us is that if you just start doing that, you actually put yourself in a risk of failing because you don't have the right tools, the right resources, the right processes to help you long term. For example, let's say you have to do a big digital transformation project. If you just start executing on it, what happens is that you actually end up without any relationships, without any change management, without any buy-in from leadership or people around you, because you all know that for you to be successful, it starts with buy-in, and it's really a change project today. And you also don't have the ability to work on your own work-life balance, because sometimes these projects take time. And if you don't put in the work to make sure you personally are set up to handle the demands in the future, you're not going to go very far. So that's one of the pitfalls, is instead of just executing, work on building the right team, work on your own personal health, work on the right playbook that'll make you adaptable, and then you execute. So you almost go slower to go faster. That's the first pitfall that we're seeing. The second pitfall is that when things get really tough in execution, that's when a lot of projects fail. Projects don't fail because strategy. It's because we can execute through the roadblocks. So for example, you got a great strategy. We're going to go implement this new technology or this new project, build this new restructuring of our organization. But when the rubber hits the road, you're going to get people that say, I don't want to change. You're going to get things that you never knew existed that are now roadblocks. And you're going to get noise. People are going to doubt your strategy. They're going to doubt whether you're a great leader. Therefore, we have to put in the right methodologies and processes in place that allow you to execute when things get tough. It's easy to do it when things are easy, but when things are against you, that's when you really need to tap into what I call is put on your headphones and focus on the 20% that'll get you 80% of the way there.
I love it. And so if we're looking now, a bit more tangibly at the world and how we can see these things come into play in the real world, I think it would help me to understand a little bit more tangibly, where are we observing these principles, these pitfalls, and these nuances that are so critical, these 20% that elevate us to the 80% out here in the real world?
Yeah, you can look at these probably in any industry today, especially after the pandemic, starting off with industries that are traditional. So industries that were brick and mortar, that were 80-90% of their revenues came from traditional channels, right? These companies have a way of executing their operations, their strategies, their teams are all built with the old business model in mind. Now what we're seeing is companies are trying to become digital first companies, which means that your revenues are now starting to come, or they want to have their revenues shift from brick and mortar to digital revenues, which is what a digital transformation is. Now, what happens when you are trying to do that is you actually are facing with resistance. You face with people who don't want to adapt. You face with strategies that are not nimble enough. And you face roadblocks that say, whoa, you were doing something like the old way. Now you want to do it the new way. It's not going to be so simple unless you actually change your foundations. So really, that's probably the root cause of why a lot of these things happen. And one of the reasons why I think the P.R.O methodology works so great is because sports teams are also operating in what we know as change, disruption, chaos, uncertainty. You can have the best plan, you can have the best players, but the moment somebody gets injured in the first quarter, the first half of a soccer game, what do you do now? You still got to play the game. And that is what business today is becoming more and more like. It's like a very similar analogy to a sports team. And if you can learn the principles of how sports teams get their players, for example, they're okay with turnover. They know some people are going to retire, but they have the right people in place to step up the next year. If businesses can start thinking like a sports team, a lot of these issues get solved automatically.
I love it. So let's say that I'm facing a difficult situation as a young entrepreneur. I'm leading a startup of, let's say, 10, 15 people, and I'm approaching, I'm approaching maybe a fundraising round that is difficult, or that the product that I'm building is not getting the right traction. What are some non-intuitive things that I can do with the pro business mindset that will allow me and my team to overcome this obstacle in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise?
Yeah. It's a great question. It has to be applicable, right? Which is the whole point of this methodology. The first chapter in the first stage of the off season, Michael, is called Aim High, punch above your weight class. What we've seen is that if you can punch above your weight class, if you can aim high, I mean, higher than 4x of what you thought your goal should be. If you're thinking about raising 20 million, you want to think about 80 million. If you're thinking about building a company with 2 million in revenue, you want to think 8 million in revenue. The moment you start to aim high, as a first step, you are forced to find ways to now make it happen. You're going to find unconventional approaches. You're going to find ways that you never thought about before. So it actually takes you out of the box that we've been put in to think like somebody else did or what we thought is possible. It allows you to do things very differently that you never thought were possible. That's the first thing. You have to open up your whole mentality.
Could that also backfire on us if I know that I have one route that I would take in order to reach $2 million ARR, but now I'm saying, well, but I really do want to get to 8 million, so I'm gonna drop this idea and I'm actually gonna go all out on this new risky go big or go home mentality. Could I also find myself in a position where I actually now have nothing because I could have had 2 million ARR in the first place?
That is definitely possible, which is why we have to also build a playbook, which is the second concept to getting there. So once you aim high, you have to say, what are the actions that I'm willing to take today that will actually help me get there? And those actions have to align to your overall goals. If you put in place the right objectives, the right actions, the right teams, and then which is the regular season now, you can actually align on the overall execution and the actions you're taking on a daily basis. That should not happen. It will backfire if you say, this is my amazing new goal, and you basically change your entire strategy to go after this goal, which is not realistic. It has to be realistic, but you have to have a playbook that allows you to get there. And the idea is that if you can aim high, you're going to find ways to achieve that overarching goal that will at least help you get to some place along the way, if not that $8 million.
Right, that makes sense. Now, as you're looking at the different organizations and leaders that you're working with today, where do they benefit really most? Where's sort of the aha moment that they get as they're going through this business mindset? What is like the switch that goes off in their mind as you're observing their growth here?
Yeah, it's all about believe it or not, it's all about the mentality and how we look at our business. This is nothing that's rocket science. People have talked about this before. This is not a breakthrough methodology that nobody ever knew. This is what great leaders always do. And when we are talking, in a keynote or a workshop for all these companies, the first thing that they always say, I have to is, hey, this is common sense. These are the things that I should be doing, but I'm not. For example, why are we not celebrating the small efforts every single week, even though we're not getting results right away? As we know that in today's environment, results take years. You're not just going to be able to turn around a company in a month So you can't say, I'm going to wait until 2 years to celebrate. When we tell them about, hey, have you ever seen a great football player, hockey player, soccer player score a goal but never celebrate, even though they might be losing? The answer is no, they always celebrate. So then I asked them the question, why are you not celebrating these small wins that are taking you closer to your $8 million, for example, of raise? So that's the common sense part.
And is it realistic, in today's environment where people are so triggered by these different news outlets, and we're seeing all the hype in the media of whatever's happening, unless we are fed this immediate gratification, unless we're fed these big stories, it may not be intuitive for us to celebrate yet because it hasn't hit the media yet. What can I, as a leader at this point, then communicate to my team to be able to not just force them to sort of celebrate it by raising a glass, but actually to get them to understand that we've done something very special here, even if it's just micro steps towards the big solution?
Absolutely. And you hit on the head, Michael. It starts with a leader, right? You have to, first of all, break down what are the small milestones that you want to achieve on your journey. That starts with leadership, first of all. So you have to know, what am I doing this week that if we can complete this action will allow me to get closer to my goals, which is where having the playbook comes in place. So if you can actually have small milestones laid out, this week we're going to meet with two new people. Next week we're going to build our presentation deck. Whatever those might be, once you hit those milestones, that for me is celebrating the effort. Now, you haven't seen results yet, but you're doing all the right things to get you there.
Right. And
so,
as we're talking here, where my mind is going is I'm thinking, I'm looking at all the different leaders that I'm seeing, and part of what I'm asking myself is also the intentionality behind becoming better leaders, right? And a lot of the questions that we're talking about here, they're incredibly important, but they require us to stop in our day to day and to reflect about how we're dealing with things, how are we celebrating, how are we being put in these situations and coming out of them as a team. What is your sort of mindset as to how intentional we should be, and at what point should we stop and think about these frameworks that you're talking about?
Yeah, so there's a concept that I talk about in, I think it's chapter 8 or 9. It's called Game of Inches. And the whole idea of this concept, Michael, is that for us to actually get better as leaders, it starts with the small things every single day. So the first thing that I've seen great leaders do, that I've learned from, that have done great things, that I've also now we're helping people do and we're seeing great results with, they find time in their calendars every day, every week, every month to work on the foundational items. Whether that's spending 20 minutes every Sunday planning out how are they going to better lead their teams and tell some sort of a story. Whether that's spending 10 minutes every day reading the news. Whether that's taking a new course every 2 months. You have to build your personal game of inches, your calendar, to put in the work consistently. You can never say, I'm going to wait until we're through this project. I'm going to wait until we get this fundraising. Then I'll go and work on my leadership. It doesn't work that way. You have to find the time every single day, every single week, every single month to take care of the foundations first. That will automatically help you become a better leader overall.
I love it. And Tanvir, I think that the work that you're doing is just so cool, and I'm excited to check out the framework myself. And it's a question that I've constantly been asking myself: how to become a better leader. And it sounds to me like that a lot of these things that you're talking about here, both there is obviously the mindset that we have to enter. But then there's actually things that we can do as leaders to improve the way that we work as a team by harnessing these ideas of sports teams mentalities and celebrating those small wins, working together towards this bigger goal, but understanding, being dynamic. And I just loved what you talked about before, the idea of goal setting and aiming above your weight class, right? And understanding that, if the one way to get out of this small box or out of this small loop that I'm used to is by aiming bigger and forcing myself to come up with innovative ways. And obviously I can see what some of the greatest leaders in our world have done through exactly harnessing this mentality.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be, Michael, that you're trying to build a new Amazon. I'll give you an example. When I left my corporate job as a VP and I decided I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in terms of my next steps. I had some ideas, but let me tell you this. if I hadn't aimed high, I would not have written this new book. This book came from my brainstorming session that I did. I remember that one Sunday where I was like, you know what? If I had all the resources in the world, if I could do whatever I wanted to do, what does that look like for me? What should I be doing if I really wanted to 4x my growth? And that was what kind of led me to what I'm doing today. So it doesn't have to be the Amazon. You can do the exact same principle for your relationships, for your personal growth, or even just living a more fulfilled life. So it works business or personal.
Tanvir, thank you so much for your time and for your energy and effort. I loved it, and I really enjoyed this conversation, and I learned a lot. And stay safe and stay healthy, and I look forward to checking out the book myself.
Absolutely, Michael. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.